Welcome back to the presentation of the Paperboy use case. This time we will explain part 3 to you. And as you recall from the previous times, this is the value network. And as you know, the business model is just a view on this value network, actually. And last time we explained in more detail about the value coming from the publisher through the Paperboy to the subscriber based on value propositions that are exchanged in a network. But this time we will focus more on what's in it for the Paperboy himself. In other words, this Paperboy, when he is involved in this business model that he has, and when he is creating that value for the customer, how does he benefit from that himself? In other words, what value does he capture? We will explain to you how that can be defined in the value management platform. And it's good to have a look again at the strategy map. Last time, you remember, we explained how so-called plan values can be defined also in the value management platform. And we explained how value to the customer, let's say, can be defined, and how one value is influencing the other value, and how you can do that in the value management platform. In particular, how, for instance, the satisfaction of the customer can be measured. This time we will focus on two other aspects. One is as the value that is captured by the Paperboy himself, as well as how value at the lower parts of the map influence plan values, because that is important. Because only when there is impact from the business model, so to say, to these plan values, then the Paperboy is allowed to steer based on it. Okay, and before we go into the app, you might see that these values that are about what the Paperboy captures for himself is more about things like effort and cost and revenue, and as you will see, also risk. These are not of direct interest for the customer or the subscribers, but they certainly are to the Paperboy. Now we go into the value management platform. The first phase of the Paperboy plan, like previous time, into the business model. Okay, here you see the graphical representation, the cubical representation of the business model again, and you see that value propositions are in focus here, and you see that there is one special sort of value propositions, you could say. We call them my propositions. My propositions from the perspective of the owner of the business model, the Paperboy. So, last time we explained to you, for instance, how value propositions coming from the newspaper company, going to the subscribers, coming back from the subscriber, like things about tip, etc., are defined as value propositions. My propositions are also value propositions, but we define them separately in the app, and these are about the value that the Paperboy captures for himself. Okay, we go into it, and you see a special tab here called My Propositions, and of course you can model it in different ways based on taste. What we did is we defined 3 aspects of My Proposition. We defined 3 propositions actually. One is called the cost proposition, a revenue proposition, and a risk proposition. Let's now go into detail in a few of them. For instance, we go into a revenue proposition. Okay, and for instance, you see here something like, and of course this is a proposition for the schoolboy, the Paperboy himself, and it's called revenue proposition. And the values coming with that, one is, for instance, tip revenue. That's the revenue based on the tip that he gets from subscribers at the end of the year, right? We go into it, tip revenue. Here, tip revenue is defined and measured. What is important here is that value capture, the way we define it here, is actually based on what's going on in the business model. Let's say when value is exchanged between participants, based on that, you can define the value that is captured by the Paperboy. So what you see here, the tip revenue is a result of, let's say, the volume of the newspaper round times the tip amount. That's logical. So 2 values here in this simple example, but they are aggregated from 2 values indeed, And as you can see, the volume comes from the paper round value proposition. That comes from the newspaper company to the paper boy. And the tip amount comes from the tip value proposition that comes from the subscribers to the paper boy. So based on these underlying value propositions in a network, we define value for a, from the perspective of the paper boy, my proposition, called here tip revenue. Okay, you can close this one. So now the value is total revenue in the same proposition, which is the sum of fee revenue and tip revenue, as you can imagine. And also these are based on underlying value propositions. The fee revenue also is, fee revenue is in this same value proposition itself. And the tip revenue, we just explained to you how it was calculated. Based on these two, you calculate total revenue. Okay, you can close this one. And now go into, for instance, one more, risk proposition. That's a special one. Risk proposition, also about the value that's captured by the paperboy himself. And there is a value in it called risk of loss of paper round. Click on this pencil. Risk of loss of paper round. Here you can see how it is measured. It's in percentage here, 100% minus the receiver satisfaction. And you can see how it is constructed. It's aggregated from an underlying value called receiver satisfaction, which is coming with the newspaper on the mat value proposition of the paperboy to the subscriber. Right? So also there you define the value, you derive the value that's captured from the underlying value proposition. Close this one. Now one more, cost proposition. Here is something more special. So this is the cost aspect of the value that is captured by the paperboy. Let's look into total cost, for instance. Click on this one. Okay, total cost. It's measured here, and it is aggregated also from, we call it here, extra byte cost. That comes from the execute round activity. Oh, wait a while. So this comes from an activity value. That means that somewhere in the process of the value stream, there is an activity that contributes this value to the total cost. And you close this one. You might remember from last time that we talked about a value stream. So there is a value proposition going to the customer, for instance, and activities that are required with their values that they contribute to deliver that value we call the value stream. And my proposition, we talk about my proposition for Paperboy here, is basically also a value proposition, and you can also define a value stream for it. So maybe go to the PowerPoint. Next page, you see here an impression of it. So this is the cost proposition as a value proposition, a special one, and there are activities in the value stream of it. So we go back to the value management platform again, and now we go to the tab activities, because there we define the value stream, cost proposition, and here you see in order to pursue that cost proposition, who, the schoolboy, in the role of paperboy, does what? Execute round and scale round, these activities, and these come with their values, and these values contribute to the values of this cost proposition. So for instance, when you click on total cost again here, this pencil, total cost, so you see the total cost again, and as this aggregated from extra byte cost of an activity. So this is based on this value stream. Another aspect that we should highlight here is, we talk about a byte. This is something like resources, competencies. Because in order for a paperboy to do his job here, he needs resources, he needs capabilities. So, and these are, close this one. These can also be defined in the app. You go to the competencies tab. So for instance, execute round. So enter competencies, as you see, for this activity, execute round, as performed by the business, with the schoolboy in the role of paperboy, uses which competencies. And there is a list of competencies, very easy ones of course, but for instance, a very likely one is the bike. He needs to have a good bike, which is here defined as a resource. Close it. So you can also, for instance, define other things like cycling, which is more a capability, right? So close it, and you can define more of it. Now we go back to my propositions, cost proposition, and total cost. And you can now understand where this comes from, right? So as part of the cost proposition for the Paperboy, there is a total cost based on using his bike as a resource, and this comes from the activity execute route. Close it. So far we have explained to you, especially in last session, how value can be created for the customer and how you define that in the value management platform. This time, how value that is captured by the Paperboy as a result of all this is defined. And there is one step further. So how all this influences the values, the plan values at the plan level. So now we go up, click this in the breadcrumb here, and we are at plan level now again. We go to plan values, and for instance, look at the plan value revenue at risk. Click this pencil. So here you see how revenue at risk is defined and measured. It is calculated as a total revenue times the risk of the loss of the paper round. Right? And here you can see where it comes from, aggregated from which other values. So this plan value is aggregated from two other values. A total revenue, which comes from the revenue proposition, which is my proposition for the Paperboy, as well as the risk of the loss of the paper round, which comes with the risk proposition as my proposition to the Paperboy. These we have seen a minute ago. So based on this, we influence the revenue at risk, which is plan value at the plan level. So now you have the circle round. Close this. So far we have defined to you in one phase, actually the as-is phase of the